Welcome back to Beyond the Reformer, and thank you so much for being here. I'm Nic, and this week's episode was recorded at the Pilates Gathering in Stirling, Scotland. And I have to say, it was such a special experience. This whole event has this incredible sense of warmth and community, and one of the people at the heart of that was Cameron Angus. Cameron is a physiotherapist and one of the organisers of the Pilates Gathering, and our conversation really opened my eyes to the growing overlap between physiotherapy and Pilates. He's a Pilates teacher as well, so he shared with me how in so many ways Pilates is stepping in to do the kind of work that physiotherapy once did, helping people move better, recover, and truly understand their bodies. I also attended his lecture at the event called the Pilates Rehabber, which was so informative and left me thinking deeply about how we, as Pilates teachers, can continue to support our clients in meaningful, sustainable ways, while staying true to ourselves and to the essence of our work. This is one of those conversations that reminds you just how powerful Pilates can be, not only as a method, but as a way of helping people live and move better. Cameron just shares so much wisdom from his life as a physiotherapist. He was also in the military and now he runs a Pilates studio. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Let's get going. Cameron, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. We're here in Stirling in Scotland at your event, the Pilates Gathering. When did this event come about?
Very good questions. First of all, thank you for having me and welcome to Stirling. The event actually started before lockdown. We had our first event in Edinburgh and my sons were the major organisers actually, so it kind of happened. And that event grew like crazy. We had about 200 people coming eventually. So that happened about 3 times, and then the pandemic. And since then, we started again afterwards, but now my sons are, they're grown men, they're getting on with their families. But more importantly, it was trying to get the event going again because it's this, what I think is a really special event. It's not tied to one school or anything, it's about community. So I brought on my pal, Joachim, who's always been involved, and we've been building it slowly again. So we're here now with nearly 100 people, but more importantly, we seem to have got the right atmosphere and buzz, a mixture of things to learn and opportunities to exchange.
It genuinely has a different feel to anything else I've ever been to. Like really, we're only halfway through the first day, but like the way that you've set it up in terms of, time to mingle and chat and get to know people, I think that's been really lovely. I feel like often you can go to events and feel quite intimidated.
I think that's really important. That's what we try and do. There's so much to learn from each other, and we often don't get that opportunity. And there's so many rich experiences to do and new friends to make that I think with lots of other pathways that go on, it's to do with maybe the school you've trained with or certain events. So it is all about that, and throw in those great teaching sessions.
And you've walked the line between Battlefield and now being a Pilates studio owner. How do these two worlds inform each other for you? Do they inform each other, or are they completely different?
I trained as a physiotherapist a long time ago, in the days when physiotherapy, exercise, well, it is exercise to get you better. That's what it is. So in those days, you trained, you had to have get signed off to, you could do a knee class and an ankle class and a shoulder class and all those sort of things. And I also did a military scholarship, so I did lots of military stuff, and a lot of my career was like that. So rehab was done properly. So very lucky to have people all day for weeks, etc., and big progressions. And I've seen everything, from too many ankles in my life to quite complex trauma. And eventually I was sort of obviously managing places like that and doing all sorts of things, lots of research. And in fact, today, one of my fellow researchers, Stevie, is doing a talk on hips. And it's quite interesting because we're actually, we're published in things like the BMJ, for stuff. So there's lots of experience there. But my Pilates experience, I'm going to go on here, is, this is how old I am. In the mid 80s, one of my first jobs down in London, I was doing the physio, but my pal was opening one of those first running shops that you had started to appear in Covent Garden. So I went up there and I bumped into ballet dancers, okay, who, not my world, but they talked about Pilates and this thing with springs. Now, in my days, we were still putting springs on beds in wards, okay, to get people to exercise. There's that going on. There's always gone on. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went along with one of the ballet dancers she said, oh, come along to this place where we do thing. And I came along and I saw reformers. And I also met Alan Herdman. So, very briefly, and had a chat about stuff. And it's really interesting because Alan has since been quite a good friend, etc. But it's quite a laugh that we bumped in. And so I was quite intrigued by this, and it kind of came and went. And then I went to America on an exchange, for a physiotherapy exchange to do with the military. And when I was in Los Angeles for a wee while, someone mentioned Pilates, and I said, oh, I was talking about that. And they said, well, there's a guy down the road who's big into it. So I went weekly to this guy and got completely into a kit. I didn't really associate who he was. It was Jay Grimes, who was one of the guys who, so he put me through my paces, etc. And then that kind of happened. I loved it. I came back to the UK, time passed, and then I saw some of the first training courses that were starting to appear when Pilates was. So I did the body control mat, and then I went on and did start equipment, etc. So things have grown. I've always been involved, and then I moved back here 10 years ago and set up my own studio with physio practice, and it's gone from there. So I've been involved with workshops, teaching for all sorts of organizations, Pilates on tour, all sorts of people, and meeting so many people from all the teachers that come here, your experience with running a place yourself, meeting lots of these, I suppose, quite famous teachers, the people that knew Pilates, or, you have people like your Michael Kings, etc. here, and all those experiences come together. I've just had that wonderful journey, and being able to sort of try and spread the news or spread that feeling to so many other people is kind of what we're about.
So what does your practice look like now in terms of physiotherapy or Pilates? Is it a mix, or are you just in the Pilates world now?
Well, it's a mix, okay, but I do less physio nowadays, okay, and I do a lot of sort of things like pain management, a bit of teaching and stuff like that. As you know, not many clients turn up who are fabulous, as in no issues, etc. So I kind of look at it as physiotherapy in a way, and I'm just enjoying, it's kind of got that different bent, but I'm enjoying people moving for their health again, and it's almost like another avenue that I have. So to me, I'm just really enjoying that. And there's some of the pressures, I suppose, of that clinical side off. But, I want people just to kind of learn how to move and a bit better and give them that opportunity. And it's, as you know, if you're teaching people, it's just great to see them evolve as best they can in various ways.
Has the physio world, has that influenced your Pilates teaching, or actually has your Pilates learnings helped influence some of your approach to physiotherapy?
Well, they come back on each other. So obviously I have, a strong clinical background, and that's been some of the stuff that's been able to inform some of the stuff I do Pilates wise. I think it's also informed some of the trends that come and go, and you try and put a bit of a balanced view to things. But at the same time, there's lots of Pilates stuff that's come across to how I get people to move in that sense. So that's been really, really good. Some of that Pilates stuff I recognize as maybe more from the dance kind of stuff, maybe rather than Joe Pilates himself, but there's that whole element. I love the history of therapeutic movement and, that sort of thing. So there's some great characters out there, of which Joe Pilates was one. And I love hearing about that. And my own mother was a remedial gymnast. She swung clubs and taught people, injured, just as I did, injured service people, she taught them. So there's a bit of history. But no, I think, one informs the other. And it's interesting on your view of that. So obviously your experience of whatever Pilates has been your experience comes across.
Tell me about your time as a military physio. Like, what got you into physiotherapy in the first place? Like you said, your mum was into movement. Was movement part of your life growing up?
I grew up not far from here in Dunblane, and my father had a friend who was a physio. I didn't really know much about that. Okay, I liked doing movement sports stuff, didn't really want to do anything with that. Kind of interested in the medical world, and then suddenly I discovered physio. So I thought, wow. And then there's various avenues you can do, but I realized that when I went to visit the military physio place, that the ethos and the buzz was completely different from the sort of NHS hospital sort of thing. So that was my ambition. And even though in training you're in the NHS a lot and different things, seeing that most of my jobs after that were this completely different, much more energetic, I think, and forward thinking as far as what exercise can do, and obviously taking people a lot further and a different caliber of person. So I started off with that and went through the whole gambit where doing basic physio stuff where, you know, physios in those days, you would do 6 months on the wards, different wards, you know, so teaching people breathing every day, ITU, all sorts of stuff. So all those rich experiences come together. But then you start to specialize. So I went on a clinical specialist sort of track as well. But also in the military, there's a sort of management thing that goes on. So starting to run rehab units and things like this and different jobs that came along, but always doing this practice. So I became a clinical specialist and a bit of research as well. And then at times I was running big rehab units as well. In that time also, I'd had that period where I got crazy with sports. So, you know, I worked for people like the British Olympic Association and stuff like that. So a bit of a gambit, but if anything, I went away from sport. And then, you know, I've seen complex trauma. And then I've been obviously in your Bosnias and your Afghans and your Iraqs, etc., where the role can be traveling around and doing all sorts of things. I sometimes say it's a little bit like rugby club physio. You know, sometimes you're doing stuff in the bar in a club, but yeah, I might fly in somewhere and it's quick assess and do stuff, etc. So different experiences, and then a field hospital, etc. And lots of different things there. And I think it's no secret I had quite a tough time when I came out, and then I left the services. Gosh, it was 15 years ago.
15 years ago you left?
Yeah, so yeah.
And then how long did you say you've had your studio for?
So I had a little bit of time down south where I was doing a bit of clinical work. So famously with Ruth Jones, who sadly not really with us anymore, but those people who do remember Ruth, she was the one that was the top pelvic floor researcher and book writer, etc. I'd met her because she came to see our guys who'd been blown up, who got injuries, basically pelvic floor, etc. And I spent time with her clinic doing pelvic floor and other sort of issues on men's health really. But then I kind of also was just sorting myself out. So then I eventually moved back what I think is home here. And it's, yeah, so then the studio's been going.
And then talk to me about how your teaching has evolved, I guess, because I imagine all of what you've just shared has enriched how you can impart your wisdom onto people of how to live a balanced life.
Like a lot of things, I think as you get older, you get wiser, as they say, hopefully, not all the time, okay? But there's this mixture of stuff that I've seen, obviously, which is a mixture of experience. There's also that kind of learning curve, and there's also the ability to reflect and critique yourself and move on, which I think is something that takes a while for us all to learn, to drop the things that really you need to drop and then take on board new stuff if you need to. I'm quite a reflective kind of guy anyway, it's kind of my nature. So I've always done that, and I've been very lucky that I got mentored by pretty good people, you know, at various stages of my life, you know, early physio-wise and those things. And I think things like mentorship, etc., have always been good. So that's how I really think. Well, this morning we did a session where I was trying to get people to think about themselves and what they do. And I think that's a very important part of Pilates teachers' way forward. So those things have all influenced me in lots of ways. Also, you know, I'm very aware, here's a thing, when as a physiotherapist, very lucky that someone said to me, you know, sometimes it doesn't matter what you do, okay, to a degree, obviously. People are going to get better, but also there is the way you are and the way you act and the things you say make such a big difference. And we know that that cognitive thing is so important. So if people have heard you're good, they're already a bit better. All right. So it's up to you how you use that responsibility in that sense. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes we're obsessed with mechanics and tissues and things, and it can become a bit trendy. But really stepping back, and that's this other side of things that I like to get across in the way you are, the way we are with your clients is important. And then, like this morning, I was saying, some people are your people and some people are not your people. And I think you've got to respect that as well. And it helps yourself and clients.
I think that's such an important message that you shared this morning, because especially when you're a new teacher, but really any teacher, you can feel really offended when someone isn't your person, like you've done something wrong. But it's you were sharing this morning, like understanding what's unique about you, attracting the kind of clients that you want, but also appreciating that you're not everybody's cup of tea and there'll be somebody else for them. And to kind of allow that. Is that something you've learned yourself, like how to stay grounded in those situations where, because it can feel offensive, but they're not right for you? And you're not right for them.
Well, precisely. Yeah, of course you're fed up, because you're amazing. And how can this person doesn't appreciate that you're amazing? And it's just, they're just not your fit in many ways. They might just not like the look of you, for goodness sake. But there's many things in this. And I think appreciating that is important. It's worth a fight to a degree, but you don't want to use too much energy. And they are someone else's person. But working on yourself as well in the way that you deal with that yourself, but also how you present yourself and appreciate your strengths and weaknesses allows you to do that. So I've always said to people, especially Pilates teachers, because I think they're always hungry, and quite rightly so, for, oh, show me another move or show me a new way to do this, a new tissue. But I've always said, maybe the next course is something about communication or skills like this. And that is probably one of the most useful things you can do.
And you've created tutorials like creating space and mindful movement, and you clearly value that sort of sensory side of this work. How do you blend that into more of the kind of biomechanical stuff that maybe people think of with Pilates? How do you blend some of those ideas in for people?
Well, the workshops are one way to just try and get that message across, even with my clients, etc. It's one of those things that, like I said to you, you start to appreciate how it works. This system works. Not so much on the mechanical stuff, etc. And, as a physio, I did all this thing. You qualify, and then there's a million courses to do and all sorts of stuff. Certainly in the first few years I was around, the cognitive side wasn't taught so much, even though I worked in an environment, for example, our big rehab units, where the positive buzz of the place was creating a lot of the healing. So again, luckily, the people mentoring me going, don't forget, it's got to be a positive. But, I worked in places where, well, in our rehab units, every single patient, if you couldn't stand, you sat. If you were on crutches, you had to stand. We'd do 20 minutes of musical exercise. So you could only wave one arm, you did, etc. But it was more about just creating a positive buzz straight away at the beginning of the day. And then that would go on all day. And that, I'm going to get better. Yes, I'll get better. There's someone else, I should get better than him, etc. is important. There's some people it didn't suit, okay? But what I'm trying to say is that's what happens. And then now we know more about mindfulness and all this sort of stuff, etc. that goes in. And if we appreciate that, I think Pilates, people weren't really evolving it. It's supposed to. And people, for some reason, were maybe going, oh, that's the yogis, etc. But you only have to read Joe Pilates' book, and it's about health, general health.
Yeah.
He's talking about it, and it's like people have gone, oh, I'll skip that page and I'll go to an exercise. So it has got that, and it's really important for people to appreciate that. So to me, the biggest thing I learned Pilates-wise was that trying to be much more appreciate what's going on in my body and be able to sense that. So we now call those things somatics, etc. But that's so important in that sense. So there's different ways of teaching that. We now call it breath work, but just breathing awareness and the things you can do. They're all really important. And so to me, that's what thing about Pilates. I think that the dance world. So these are the dancers that Pilates taught, adding their bit, have put really good stuff on it, because it's that opposition stuff. It's that feeling of space. When so much of out there, even at the moment where strength and conditioning has gone mad, as usual, things come in that are good and then they go over the top, and it can be quite compressive. So we're teaching the opposite. I say to clients, even the old boy who's 60 who comes into me, I go, listen, there's a reason the dancers did this, because they can get it. They can go, oh yeah, I look at that person and I go, they're strong, but they're not all muscly and like this. They're moving and it looks great. So it's things like that. So there's various ways of getting it in. But
you've talked about how posture is a sort of response to your belief systems and the kind of things that you've just been sharing. How do we as teachers then, look at someone's posture and help them? I think most people would agree that Pilates helps posture. How can we help? Because it's not just the movements. It's also, like you've shared, your belief systems, your psychology. How do we tap into that within the scope of our work that we're doing with people?
Your posture is your, position at any one time or whatever. It's an awareness. It's how you feel. So we know the person that looks sad, we know their posture, and this morning we did the James Brown thing. Okay, it just works. I think that what it does with us as movement teachers is, by not just teaching a movement, but going to people, how does that feel? Or then just being able to sort of cue or say something that gets them to think, oh, this feels good, or whatever it is. And then carry on from that would be, that makes me feel good, and therefore on and on. So there's this window that you get a chance to be in, and so that's where it's really important that Pilates is not just the movement, it's how you feel, and then moving on from there. So there's that, I suppose, as I said, somaticness of it. But you as a teacher sometimes need to prompt that. A lot of your clients, they're not looking for that, but they might go out and go, yeah, that feels good, but it's just prodding a bit deeper. And I think that's what is really good, because then that's what people really pick up on, and then they're aware of their posture. They become more aware of their body movement and positions, etc. And also I think there's a little bit about, I'm a bit of a disruptive sometimes, so I like to sometimes say, like, it's okay to slump, because I'm deliberately saying there's no one movement that's perfect. You're allowed to do everything, and just try not to stay in one thing forever. And I think people have felt guilty about some movements, and then they're almost like sitting up straight, it's too hard and restrictive, etc. So there's a lot of education going on as well, and about what the words mean. And I think that's where people,
well, the cues are important, aren't they? And what you said about asking our clients, how does something feel? My experience, the clients with chronic pain can barely say if it's good or bad. They're so, switched off from their bodies. And part of what we're doing is trying to actually get them to feel and notice. And if you ask a movement teacher, how does it feel? They could probably answer a paragraph, but trying to even get a word or a sentence out of somebody. So it's important, isn't it, that we start to kind of get them to open themselves up to noticing it, because if they don't notice it, they haven't really felt it then. And like you said, our cueing is a big part of that. Can we use our cueing to help our clients feel a certain way rather than maybe just do the movements?
Sure, and there's the communication thing again. So we know in pain management, okay, that communication is the big thing, and being able to get people to appreciate various aspects of what's going on, what they feel, what that response is, okay, awareness of what they've been doing, so going into things like pacing and various aspects of that. And then because pain is this sort of super experience of many things, and being able to sort of do that is what goes on with pain management now. That's why you get people be aware of the stresses in life, the room they're in, and then not just bits of their body, but listen to it, but just appreciate what else is going on, and all those many things, which is what pain is now. It's this experience. So we've gone away from the original, a long time ago, just a physical thing. Then it all got a bit too brainy, and hopefully now it's slipped somewhere in the middle, which is what we want. So so as movement teacher, people suddenly go, oh, actually, that feels good. Yesterday, someone was going, oh, that's something's clicking. I'm going, well, that just tells you it's moving, right? So, because if it's not sore or anything like this, different ways of looking at stuff in that way.
Well, sometimes people can be so scared of any sort of pain that, of course, then they stop moving. And that's kind of the worst thing they can do. So I guess sometimes your pain is, I mean, I'd love your thoughts on pain, because I always think sometimes pain is your body saying, this is not good. But sometimes it's just saying, like, it's feeding back and saying, oh, I'm not sure about this. And only really you as the person can decide what that pain means. But because people get themselves in a right pickle, don't they, with pain?
Well, this is it. And there's a number of things. First of all, it is this thing that decision we come to pain from many inputs, all right? And some of them are false sometimes, all right? But they've been learnt or it's past experience that makes you go pain, etc. So what happens is we have to do a bit of education, all right? And the way you do that is important. And then there's a little bit of, as we move, this is where progressive movement and, just slowly going through different progressions are helpful, because there's a point, that's okay. And that it gives confidence and allows people to move. And then the next bit, and that's where how that works in a way, along with how many you do and stuff like that. So I often say, finding a sweet spot, which is a bit where you're moving enough and doing enough where there's not much reaction. Okay, nothing, the sort of reaction people go, yeah, okay, I kind of expect a bit of that, but it's not enough to stop me. But not so much that people are crippled again, because you need to do enough to change, but not so much to go too far. And that sweet spot, and that is the secret of everything, really. I'm going to talk about rehab tomorrow, etc. And really, most rehab is just constantly looking for the sweet spots for various aspects. So in pain management, of which probably, the best guys are the NOI group and people like that, the ones that have evolved, that it's this multi-sensory thing that goes on, and not just explain it, but try and give movement teachers a little bit more help. So I think Pilates teachers sometimes by accident just do it really well, because they're going, right, this person's here, I need to give them something to do. I'll start doing stuff that doesn't hurt them. I'm fine. So they do it, and that's good. And then, that's not sure, just experiment a bit. So they're going to do the progressions because that's kind of what they're about. And they've got a nice variety of things that they can do. Because there's also this element of people can do things that seem completely not associated to the sore knee by moving your arms and things. But in your brain, all sorts of stuff is going on, and the decision making you're getting from the feelings you're getting overall, and just then eventually feeling good just because you move something else, it all helps. It all goes in the pot. It's this big pot.
I often think that when I'm mentoring like newer teachers, like, don't always have to go to the source of pain, like go elsewhere where someone's got a bit more accessibility, and they'll often feel a lot better, just like you said, because they've got them moving and they've had this pain-free movement experience, which has boosted their confidence, boosted, how they feel about themselves. Talk to me about, you obviously had your studio. When did then you start mentoring and teaching people to be teachers?
Well, I've had a big experience with mentoring physios and some of the doctors we had in rehab. So I did a lot of mentoring and stuff and mentoring training. Before I moved up here, I'd started to do some stuff because I was running workshops for people like body control and stuff like that. Okay, so a little bit of that had happened. Then when I moved up here, I was happy to have people do much more studio training. So it's not a regular thing. It's just occasionally enough people come together, we do that. And there's mentoring. And then I just have small mentoring groups. So some people are online and some people at the studio occasionally. Because I used to do a lot of pain management, physio stuff online before the days of Zoom, really. So happy to do mentoring online. So it depends what that person kind of is looking for. Since I've been here, I've been doing a fair amount of it, so it's good. And then I have teachers come to the studio. Some teachers are on a Zoom group, etc., as well. And some clients, they've come a long way, as they do.
And what do you see as the biggest gaps in training at the moment?
So, as you know, the training for Pilates is quite a large spectrum. And some people just need certain amount because that's what they're looking for and to teach. And others maybe do full cert on quite an intensive course, etc. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other, etc. I think to me personally, because of the way I kind of like to get it, is to make sure that teachers training that they're getting the juice of what it's really about. So they're not just learning, here's the exercise, here's this exercise with this name, here's this exercise with this name. It's the feeling you should get when you do it, all right? The feeling you're looking for and the sort of options around that, etc. What the essence of the exercise is really about. So it's not about 10 of those, etc. It's more than that. So I think that sometimes is missed in an effort to just run through a book with lots of exercises. That to me is the biggest thing. And I think if some teachers maybe can't do a lot more of that sort of stuff, which I think needs a lot more mentoring. I don't think you can do it online personally. I think some people doing shorter courses, I think being given the opportunity to expand what they do rather than, yeah, that's you, off you go and whatever. And I think some people then get a bit stuck because they don't feel they've been given permission to evolve where they are.
When I did my training, like continuing ed was just a given, like, A, you had to do it, and B, it was really encouraged. As a studio owner, we have teachers from lots of different teacher training schools, and it's so interesting, the ones that, like you said, they don't even talk about it as a thing. So I feel like these people maybe feel like they're not allowed to go to a Polestar Pilates continuing ed, which they are, or a STOT, or, and also one of the things that's come up on many of these interviews is just the sort of rich tapestry of Pilates out there and exposing yourself to some different ideas. Have you done that? Have you looked at kind of, different ways of thinking? Has that influenced your style as a teacher?
Yeah, I think that's always been my way. People come to me and say, oh, I've had physiotherapy. And I say to them, oh, tell me what happened, because I don't even know what it means anymore. I thought I did. There's a certain regimentation for some things in that world. Pilates has become really spread out, and unfortunately, some blocks don't seem to want to join up. And I can I don't understand reasons, but some of it's business interest. There's been opportunities and efforts to try and put things together, and it's not always worked. But I think that taking the chance to look at different things and then take it, and then you have to be able to take it on board, rather than to keep dismissing stuff that your way is always right. So you find things that resonate with you, and maybe that training school does, etc. But I think it's important, and it's exactly what this event, the gathering, is about, is to come along and don't feel that that it's stuck on one thing. There's all these different experiences and different people, and the atmosphere should be that you can just chat about that and take it from there. So yeah, I've been lucky to come across so many different people from so many different aspects of what Pilates is and was, and see them in action or be taught by them and all sorts of things. And it is truly a kaleidoscope of all sorts of stuff. There's common themes to a degree. There's some quite regimented bits in it, which is fine if someone wants to do that. There isn't quite the divisions that you've got to be careful on social media as to how that sort of comes across. There's some places you just think there's no need for this. I think there's enough kind of love in the Pilates world that there is this spread and people doing it. Coming across to professional development, I think the element that most people still really don't get is it doesn't have to be yet another course. It doesn't have to be yet another this. You can sit and reflect and record that. So in physiotherapy, we have to record our CPD. It's how we're monitored by the Health Professions Council. So I can say I've read an article about a patient I've seen or a condition or whatever. I can reflect on that. I can and write notes, etc. And then about the teacher, and I record all that in a special diary. Okay, and that is CPD. That's me thinking about what's going on. And I think that an example, a lot of Pilates teachers could take that on board, that you don't have to. You could sit and reflect on what you do, record it, and that's really learning ongoing. And then from there, that is professional development. sometimes more than going to a course where maybe you kind of fall asleep in the afternoon. I think what people worry about is you've got to be able to demonstrate it, where you can record it and demonstrate it. And if anyone said to you, oh, you weren't keeping up with stuff, then actually that is demonstrating you are keeping up with stuff.
What kind of things could a teacher sit and reflect on? What questions might you ask yourself?
So you could maybe have seen a client who maybe came along who was struggling with certain moves, etc. And you can go, why weren't they responding to my cues? Or something like this. And did I adjust that well, or did I not adjust that well? Things like that. So that it could be as simple as that. It could be that someone came along and they had a hip replacement, for example. And you go, right, okay, for example, I contacted the local physio, found out what had gone on, they're ready for me, etc. What was the protocol? And then I maybe do some more reading, and then I sort of did that. So you can record that, you can just write it down. And what have I learned from that? Things like this. That is professional development.
Such an important point you make, because I think sometimes when things maybe don't go as well as we'd like them to, we can just get into a mentality of I've done something wrong and catastrophize. And actually just sitting and reflecting, you're absolutely right, because you learn so much from your clients and you think, well, I'm going to approach that differently next time. Cameron, we've come to the end of our conversation. I always end the podcast with some quick fire questions. A cue you once used but you don't use anymore.
Completely guilty of abdominal drawing in, which was trendy for a while.
That was what we were all taught originally.
Well, because there was a little bit of the physio thing as well, because the Paul Hodges research kind of was starting that. And anyway, so completely guilty of that. Dropped for years now.
Favourite Pilates exercise?
Oh, hundreds.
A book or a person that has changed your ideas on movement?
In the early days, there's a lady called Shirley Sharman, who is a physio, and her books were sort of the beginning of movement change. There's issues with them in that sense. But the other person I think is a lovely story about movement is a book about Margaret Morris, who was the ballet dancer stroke rehab person stroke completely wild child who lived in Scotland. If you ever get a chance to find out about her, she's fabulous.
I'll have to have a look. And what's next for you? What does the balance of your kind of life look like now with teaching and mentoring and studios, and where are you going with that?
I'm ticking away very nicely. I'm looking forward to the gathering just growing a little bit bigger again. I've got a bit more mentoring stuff to do and a bit more work on just developing some of my workshops again, okay, because they took a bit of a back seat. And especially I started doing the Fearless Spine workshop, which is completely dominated by getting people to move fearlessly with joy, as they say, which is a big secret to back care in that sense. So I'm going to be building that up again.
And if people are listening and they want to work with you, how can they find out more about you?
So at the moment, the best way through is at the studio, so Coney Hill Studio, and because I'm just redoing the actual website that was my own, okay? So that's the best way. So Cameron at coneyhillstudio.com.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm loving this weekend. I'm loving the location. It's such an amazing, genuinely blown me away, this event. I really love just the sort of relaxed nature of it, and I'm looking forward to this afternoon doing some movement. You've got all the balance. We're sat with loads of boxes behind us if you're not watching us on video. We've got so much balanced body equipment here, and it's really nice for everyone to explore some different ideas on the equipment as well as the mat. I know you're doing some lectures as well, and you're doing some lectures even on like some of the business and social media, which is such an important part of, I was even talking to Michael King, and we were talking about how, being profitable in this world is tricky. And so these are all part of it. So it's great that you're bringing all these things to all the guests that are here.
Well, thanks for coming along. I love it. It's a lot of work goes into it, but once it happens, there's a buzz for everyone. And Balanced Body have always been a good supporter of us. But yeah, that's good.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Cameron Angus as much as I did. I also want to take a moment to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been listening, sharing and supporting Beyond the Reformer. This podcast has now grown bigger than I ever imagined, and that's all down to you, this amazing, curious, passionate community that keeps showing up week after week. Every listen, every share, every message helps this conversation grow, and it really means the world to me. So if this episode resonated with you, please keep sharing it, tag me, and help more teachers find the space where we can learn, reflect, and go a little bit deeper beyond the reformer.